Hey horror fans, welcome to this series on Soviet creepypastas. As for today's stories, some are straight up terrifying, others lean more into the mystical, but they're all good in their own way and definitely worth your time. Before we dive in, you know the drill. If you want more content like this, smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join the community. We've got plenty more nightmares where these came from. So get comfortable, turn off the lights if you dare, and let's get started. Enjoy the ride. In the mid-1990s, those lawless years, a quiet provincial town not far from the center was shaken by alarming news. A serial killer had appeared. He went on a brutal hunt at night when most townsfolk were asleep, and stray dogs, survivors of cold and hunger, roamed the yards. His victims were young women who happened to be out alone late at night. Some might say there was nothing surprising about another psycho killer. The era of lawlessness, banditry, and cruelty set the rules. After sunset, the beacon of life stopped shining for Russian citizens. But this killer was a mystery, both to frightened locals and to the detectives on his trail. There was one detail that set him apart from the hundreds of serial murderers flooding the cities of the former USSR. All the murdered women had torn wounds on their ear arteries. The overall pattern suggested the killer first strangled his victims and then inflicted those tears. Because of this signature, law enforcement gave him the unofficial nickname, the Vampire. Despite the police and prosecutors trying to keep certain details under wraps to avoid panic, the pushy press spilled the beans on the killer's habits. People, being superstitious by nature and ready to buy any newspaper yarn, firmly believed that a real vampire had come to town. That explained his elusiveness. He couldn't be caught because he wasn't human, but an undead, supernatural being. When every attempt to catch the maniac failed, law enforcement took a desperate step. They found a willing volunteer, a young female officer, a former athlete, cool-headed and utterly fearless in the face of the surrounding nightmare. She was given a dangerous assignment to walk the deserted streets at night and serve as bait. She carried out her duty with honor. After several nights, on one of her patrols, the brave officer, disguised as a timid, scared girl, encountered a suspicious middle-aged man. He followed her for a long time without showing aggression. Only when she fully realized she was being stalked and that nothing good would come of it, did the predator sense her fear and rush at her. A thin leather strap began to tighten around her neck. The officer knew she couldn't overpower her attacker, but at the last second, she reached the panic button in her coat pocket and signaled the backup team. Fortunately, the squad arrived quickly. The maniac was arrested, and the injured woman was taken to the hospital. During the trial, the killer confessed to all his crimes. He also revealed his terrible secret. He bit, and sometimes cut, his victims' necks and drank their blood. It might sound strange to us, but the defendant explained his bloody urge with chilling logic. His mother was the head of a blood transfusion station. Apparently, she wasn't all there. She believed human blood was the best vitamin for her child's development. She brought blood from work and later started feeding her son her own blood. When the hospital blood supply ran out and his mother grew too old, the young vampire switched to stray animals. But one day, he craved human blood again. The killer pleaded guilty, but even in court, he didn't renounce his belief in the benefits of consuming fresh human blood. He worked at the local housing office and had a good reputation. No one could have imagined his savage nature. When he was finally caught and sentenced to life in a distant northern prison, the town breathed a sigh of relief. By the way, the officer who helped catch the vampire recovered. According to one rumor, she left the force. According to another, she still works there. Sit down. Mikhailuk sat on a stool, scooted up to a low table covered in a torn oilcloth with an overflowing ashtray in the middle, and poured vodka into 2 shot glasses. "I don't drink," I said, sitting down. "Well, screw you then." Mikhailuk downed his glass in one gulp and sniffed the greasy sleeve of his blue coveralls. "So, why'd you call me, Mikhailuk?" "To celebrate my first week at the factory." I looked around. The room we were in was a standard tool shed. No windows, a crooked wooden door you had to kick to close, low ceiling, dark yellow walls, a shelf with tools and junk against one wall, a table with stools against the other, and a flickering old incandescent bulb bathing everything in murky orange light. "Uh-huh." Mikhailuk nodded, pouring himself more cheap vodka. "Look, I'm not gonna bullshit you. I don't know why you took this job. Not everyone has to be a programmer, and I sure couldn't be. My grandpa taught me to turn parts on a lathe." "That's not what I meant." Mikhailuk waved his hand and knocked back a second shot. In my little town, you can either work as a cashier at the grocery store, as a laborer, or at the factory, which is where I ended up. I wasn't cut out for college. The army didn't take me. My parents said, "Get a job, we're not feeding you." So I became a mechanic. Well, a mechanic's assistant, under Mikhailik's supervision. So what's this about? Do you think the factory's gonna close? Who the hell knows if it'll close or not? It's still standing somehow, limping along. Might last a few more years. Our factory is a city-forming enterprise, like many others. After the Soviet collapse, it's seen better days. Most of the area is abandoned ruins. The rest are half-alive workshops and warehouses rented out. Typical industrial zone on the outskirts. Crumbling roads, piles of construction and household garbage. Obscene graffiti on the walls. Streetlights? Non-existent. And sometimes, off in the distance, you hear screams. But you can't tell who's screaming. So, what's up? Mikhailik, if I'm doing something wrong, just tell me. Mikhailik didn't answer. He stared at me seriously for half a minute, brow furrowed, and I waited for him to speak. In the silence, you could hear the bulb crackling. I couldn't have guessed what he was about to say. He looked like a regular working-class guy, roughly shaven, about 50 or 60, stocky, with hands black from labor. "Hey, do you believe in God?" His words cut through the silence like a knife through butter. "What? Mikhailik?" I nearly choked, thinking he was about to recruit me into some cult. No, not God. In the mystical, the supernatural, devilry, whatever you call it. Mikhailik was trying to explain with his hands. I hesitated, not knowing what to say. My family was religious, but I wasn't especially devout. I didn't go to church or pray. I believed in something, I guess, but I didn't know what. Mikhailik poured another shot and downed it. It was obvious that amount of alcohol didn't faze him. He didn't seem even a bit drunk. "All right, forget it. You've noticed that around the factory and nearby, there's not a single dog, right?" "Yeah. Are they all caught, or do they just not live here?" "In the rest of the city, they roam in packs, won't let you pass. Give them any excuse and they'll tear you apart. You know how that guy got mauled in winter. But here, not even tracks. No howling at night, they don't stay. And cats don't stick around either." I hadn't paid much attention before, but Mikhailik was right. On the factory grounds, I'd never seen a single four-legged animal, dog or cat. Only crows and magpies flew over the plant, perching on roofs and watching with their black eyes. Okay, no animals. So what? I genuinely didn't see where he was going with this. How do I explain it? Mikhailik leaned his cheek on his hand and started drilling the wall with his gaze, thinking. No animals. They don't come here. What does that tell you? I don't know. Maybe they don't like it, or they're afraid. They sense the world better than we do. I had a vague feeling this conversation wasn't going to be about life and hard fate. How Mikhailik had busted his back at the factory and got nothing in return. Afraid of what? People? If only it were people. Mikhailik reached for another shot, but stopped himself. Listen, you're new, but you've probably noticed something weird about this factory. No, it's just a factory, nothing special. Remember when I was showing you how to turn that thing and there was a sound, like a concrete beam falling into a dump truck? Quiet, barely audible over the machines. I remember it. Then Anatolievich, with his bad knees, ran to the other end of the workshop and came back pale as a ghost, and called me and a couple other guys. Yeah, you said it was nothing. I saw them hauling rebar and sheet metal. They were struggling, but they moved it. Roof collapse or something, right? Happens. Saving money on building repairs, then walls fall down and you have to patch them up. What walls? What roof? Have you been in that part of the building? No, there's a lock on the door. Besides, what's there to do? It's a dead zone. Exactly. All right. I said I wouldn't bullshit you, so I'll tell you everything. I leaned in closer so I wouldn't miss a thing. It all started in the 80s. The factory was already on its last legs, but it still kinda worked. I was young then, just like you now. Maybe a bit older, doesn't matter. Our shop foreman was Viktor Sergeyevich. I don't remember his last name. Anatolievich was his deputy. Now Anatolievich is the foreman, but back then he was a gopher. I'd been working for a while, doing my job right. One day, Anatolievich comes running up to me, says he needs help urgently and he's shaking like a leaf. So we went. He didn't explain what or why, just led me to the other side of the building, to the non-operational zone. There was a basement entrance there. You go down some stairs and there's an iron door. It didn't lead to the basement under us, but to a separate one. Nobody knew what it was for. We used it to store junk and spare parts. So Anatolievich and I get there, and there are already 3 guys. One's holding rebar, another's welding it, the third's helping. Anatolievich sees they're not in a hurry and yells at them to speed up. I'd never seen him raise his voice. The guys just said, "Boss's orders." Anatolievich put me to work and ran off. I asked the guys what they were doing. They couldn't explain it themselves. Just said Anatolievich had dragged them away from their work and told them, "Weld this door shut properly, and you'll get your annual bonus." "And then?" I asked, rocking on my stool. So we welded the door, solidly. The door itself was thick, about 3 centimeters, and we reinforced it with rebar. When Anatolievich came back, we asked him why we did all that. He couldn't explain, mumbled something, handed us cash, and let us go, telling us not to talk about it. Okay, let's say that happened. What next? The first 2 days were normal, but nobody saw our foreman, Viktor Sergeyevich. He was a stern guy. He liked to walk around the shop checking who was slacking off, but now he was gone. To be fair, he'd been acting off lately, seen less often, disheveled, bags under his eyes. He could tear into you for any screw-up. Everyone thought management was on his case for not meeting the plan, or that he was burnt out. We talked among the guys who welded the door and guessed that we'd actually welded Sergeyevich in there, that Anatolievich wanted his job, so he got rid of him, saying he'd run off. But we didn't do anything. After all, we were the ones who sealed him in, and we got paid for it. Mikhalich, are you saying the ghost of your old foreman is causing trouble? I thought I had it figured out. I assumed he was trying to scare the newbie. I was about to get up and leave, but the old worker stopped me. Wait, hear me out. Right after that, all the cats and dogs disappeared. Not just left, fled. We had a cat in the workshop. We fed her scraps. And right around those days, after we welded the door, she ran off. I was told she first stared toward the non-operational zone, arched her back, fur standing on end, then bolted like the devil was after her. Nobody ever saw her again. I'd be glad if that was all. But what started after that was way beyond reason. You've got a poltergeist? I stopped taking Mikhalich seriously. Laugh all you want, but see this gray hair? What happened next? Mikhalich sighed and continued. Then came the banging. On the 3rd day, I'm standing at my lathe, feeling this vibration. Thought something got caught in the machine. Then I heard a dull thud. Another. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Then Anatolievich comes running up, white as a sheet, says, "Let's go there." I knew immediately what he meant. So we all rushed over, 5 of us, and stood in front of that door. Anatolievich was pale and shaking, and we had no clue what was happening. Just as we were about to ask him, a crash came from behind the door. The ground shook. We all froze. Anatolievich started screaming to weld the door again. I looked and saw that the welds on the door and the rebar had cracked in several places. We might have just stood there staring if another blow hadn't landed, harder than before. I actually saw the door buckle. We jumped into action. Anatolievich was yelling, almost crying, begging us to weld it as fast as possible. Nobody understood anything. Everyone was rushing, shouting, hands shaking, electrodes breaking, cables tangling around our feet. That's when I felt real terror. I'd never experienced fear like that. Picture it. You're young and green, you don't know what's happening. Everyone's frantic, panicking, cursing, and behind that steel door, something is trying to break out, pounding the metal. You can feel the vibration in your bones. That thing almost knocked out a welded 3-centimeter steel door. Can you imagine the force? That wasn't human. It couldn't be human. We all knew then, if we didn't weld it better than before, we were dead. The banging didn't stop, but we managed to finish. Afterwards, when we caught our breath, one of us asked Anatolievich straight up what the hell that was. Mikalik poured himself vodka, exhaled, drank, and sniffed his sleeve. He said that thing must not get out, but we grabbed him by the collar and said, "Talk, all of it." Anatolievich is soft, so he caved quickly. Viktor Sergeyevich had wanted to do something with that basement. What exactly, he never said. Maybe he wanted to profit off it, I don't know. Anatolievich doesn't know either what he did or found down there. But right after that, Sergeyevich started acting nervous. He dumped all his work on Anatolievich and spent all his time in that basement. Said no one was to go in, no one to be let in. He'd run out, go somewhere, then come back. He spent days and nights down there, and then one day he just didn't come out. Anatolievich waited a day, then went down to check. He went into the basement, looked, and ran straight to us to weld that door. What was banging on it we never found out, and maybe that's for the best. Anatolievich only once, drunk, said he caught a glimpse of it for an instant, out of the corner of his eye, and even that gives him nightmares. He said it was more terrifying than the devil himself. And that's it? No, of course not. Those bangs have been going on for 40 years, day and night. The first years, every day, multiple times, and we kept welding. Then they became less frequent, but they never stopped. The country fell apart, but the banging continued. I can't even imagine what could be in there, and I don't want to know. And what didn't we try? Brought a priest. He stank up the place with his incense more than anything. Attached icons to the door. They flew off after 2 or 3 hits, glued Bible pages. Drew crap all over, put the Quran, beads, trinkets, nothing works. Sometimes we even set up night shifts to watch if anything broke loose. Now we just patch it up once a month or two, more out of habit. Mikalik poured more vodka, but could only down half of it. His speech started to slur a bit, and he relaxed. "You're making this up." I didn't believe him at all. To me, it was an old man's ramblings. I thought it was some kind of prank, a local rite of passage for newbies. It all seemed ridiculous. Didn't anyone look for Viktor Sergeyevich? And how did no one find out if the banging happened every day? They did look. We all said we hadn't seen him, said he'd run off with the money that was supposed to be our bonus. Even though Anatolievich is a softie, he cooked up the story. As for the banging, we said we were doing repairs. You couldn't really hear it during the day, the basement's far and the machines are running. Only at night could you hear it. We said we were working. Then everyone got used to it, and the Soviet Union collapsed. I felt like I'd just watched a cheesy alien documentary. You don't believe me. Sometimes I don't either, but when you see that door, you'll understand. Come on, I'll show you. All right, let's go. I wanted Mikalish to finally drop his old tales. The shift was long over. No one else was in the factory, except us. We left the tool shed and walked through the long, 100-meter workshop with its high ceiling. It was crammed with machinery, cables hanging everywhere, but only half of it was working. The lathes, stained with oil, were older than anyone in town. Flickering bulbs, just as old. Metal shavings everywhere. Someone had left their coveralls. In hidden corners, cigarette butts. The air smelled of oil, exhaust, tobacco, iron, and sweat. Paint was peeling off the walls, revealing years of layers. The concrete floor was cracked. Through dirty wooden-framed windows, darkness. The factory was living out its last days. We walked to the end of the workshop. The sound of our footsteps echoed. Mikalik moved surprisingly fast and steady for a drunk. Soon we came to a door with chains and a padlock. Mikalik stopped, remembered he needed the key, and went back for it, leaving me alone. I leaned my back against the door. Silence engulfed me. I heard nothing but the ringing in my ears and my own breathing. I stood there for a minute, 2, 3. I got bored and started thinking about heading home. I told myself if Mikalik wasn't back in 10 minutes, I'd leave. Then, one thought led to another. I was pulled out of my thoughts by a strange sound. No, not a sound. A low, drawn-out hum, a vibration at the edge of hearing but felt through the whole body. I immediately felt uneasy, terrified. Suddenly, I felt defenseless, insignificant. I wanted to run as far away as possible and hide. The closest comparison was the distant drone of a motorcycle, shifting into the muffled sound of a plane, ending in something like a broken saxophone, then back to the motorcycle hum. It was so strange, so unnatural, that my skin crawled. I shook it off, telling myself it was just heavy equipment passing by. But what came after that hum, I couldn't explain. Another sound, completely different, like someone scratching a chalkboard with their nails or dragging a knife along a wall. I listened hard, trying to identify it, but I couldn't. Soon, Mikalik returned with a set of keys. He fumbled with trembling hands at the lock, finally opened it, and flipped a switch. Before me appeared a room about 20 by 30 meters, lit by 2 incandescent bulbs, more peeling walls, broken tiles on the floor, empty space, and in the far corner, stairs leading down. The smell of dampness and decay hit my nose. Mikalik clearly didn't want to go down. I decided to act tough, show that I wasn't scared of any old tales, and strode confidently toward the stairs. Only then did Mikalik follow. Reaching my side like a guide, he pointed the way. I descended the short concrete stairs with rounded, chipped edges, and I saw the door. I was stunned. It was hard to even call it a door. A massive pile of welded iron, steel plates, angle irons, rebar set into holes drilled in the walls, ceiling, and floor. Huge metal blocks at the base, beams, pipes, and between them all, icons, beads, talismans. The flat surfaces of this steel wall were covered with symbols, pentagrams, hieroglyphs, and yellowed, cracked pages from sacred texts. The floor around the door was littered with rust powder mixed with cigarette butts. This wasn't a door. It was a full-blown metal barricade. "And you guys welded all this?" I asked, gesturing. "Yeah," Mikalik said quietly. "Convinced now? Anatolievich keeps saying it's not enough. He wants to pour concrete over everything. Maybe then he'll finally relax and retire." I looked over the metal monstrosity again and reached out my hand to knock. Mikalik grabbed my wrist tightly. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Are you insane? What's the big deal? It's all sealed up. What could happen?" I still didn't believe his story. "Maybe it is sealed," he said, letting me go. "But you don't mess with things like that. That's it. You've seen it. Let's go." Mikalik's fear somehow rubbed off on me. On a subconscious level, I started seeing something threatening in that iron structure. Or maybe the lingering dread from the hum hadn't faded. I was scared, but I didn't want to admit it even to myself. I only knew that there was something wrong in that mass of iron and steel. We went back to the tool shed. "So why did you tell me all this?" I asked. Mikalik didn't answer, poured, and drank. "I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to get it off my chest. We never tell anyone, and I'm getting old." He sighed heavily. Now I looked at him differently. That door still haunted my thoughts. I couldn't understand why they'd built all that. "Anatolievich says we could use a young helper when we pour the concrete. But you know what I think? Nothing's gonna happen to that door." "Then why were you so scared?" "You know the saying, let sleeping dogs lie. Same here. I'm more worried about the basement itself. Why worry? It's all concrete. That's the thing. 1.20 meters, maybe more. But think about it. Whatever's in there has been trapped for 40 years. What if it's not just banging on the door? What if it's digging a tunnel? Breaking concrete wouldn't be that hard for it if it can bend a welded steel door. On one side, concrete and earth. On the other, the door and more concrete." Mikalik tensed, shrank, as if afraid of his own words. "What's on the other side?" "On the other side, 10 meters away, the main basement begins, from where you can get to the surface. And what I fear most is that it's been digging all this time. Maybe not in that direction, but digging. Forget it. Don't listen to a foolish old man. Let's go home." Together, we put the keys back, turned off all the lights, and went our separate ways. That night was quiet. I stopped to look at the factory building, reflecting on everything I'd heard. I didn't want to believe it, but in the distance, a weak thud sounded. Something, somewhere, hitting metal. It could have been anywhere in the industrial zone. Someone dismantling a workshop for scrap. That had happened before. Or a ceiling collapse, also known. But still, the seed of fear was planted, and a second identical sound made it grow. No, I didn't quit the factory. I didn't leave town. I kept working as before. I told no one about it. Even Mikalik never brought it up again. But I started listening. I started distinguishing among the factory noises the heavy, resonant thuds against metal, buried beneath the roar of machines. If you were lucky enough to hear them, you could mistake them for natural factory sounds, but they weren't. The more I listened, the more I realized they couldn't be natural. For a long time, I refused to accept that something was beating on that door to get out. The thought that it might be an elaborate prank faded because no one, under any circumstances, ever mentioned it again. Not even a hint. And with that, the fear in my soul grew, to the point that it started to affect my pride. No way a guy like me is afraid of old factory tales. I thought it might be a misunderstanding, settling foundations, a burst pipe. To test it, to conquer my anxiety, I spent days looking for an entrance to the part of the basement that should have been under the non-operational zone. No luck. I looked for doors, secret hatches, entrances. Why was I so sure a separate basement existed? I specifically found the building plans from the year it was built, and indeed, there was a separate basement right under the non-operational section. And it had only one entrance, that sealed steel door. For days I wrestled with doubt, but finally decided to fight the fear radically. I waited until everyone had left the factory, grabbed the keys to the non-operational zone, opened the padlock, turned on the lights, and went down to the door. To be honest, it was terrifying to stand there alone in front of that door. Its mass of rusty metal alone inspired dread, especially when your mind conjured up images of what might be hiding behind it. But I told myself, "You're here, see it through." I stretched out my arm, climbing over rebar and beams, and touched a flat surface. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. I smirked. What a load of crap the old man fed you and you bought it. I brushed rust off my hand, planted my fists on my hips, and stared at the pile of welded iron with a stupid grin. That grin vanished from my face and my eyes went wide when, in the silence of the basement, I heard heavy, rapid stomping behind the door, a low, guttural growl, and then a deafening impact. Something impossibly heavy and powerful slammed into the door. I didn't hear it. I felt it. The shock wave passed through my whole body, vibrating in my lungs. My ears rang. Instinctively, I stumbled back on shaky legs and fell into a pile of rust and cigarette butts. A single cry escaped my throat. It didn't stop at one blow. Whatever was on the other side kept hammering that door with incredible speed and force. Faster than my heart, which was trying to burst out of my chest. Concrete around the door began to crumble and dust. Rust flaked off, welds popped. Metal pieces bent and tore away. I lay on the floor, covering my ears, screaming in terror, feeling the floor shake, and with it, my own insides resonating with that horrible hum. An unbelievable fear, sharp as a needle, pierced through me. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't even stand. Everything Mikalik had said was true, and with every impact, my fear grew. With every impact, I understood that that thing behind the door was getting closer to me. Then the blows abruptly stopped. I still had my ears covered and my eyes shut. A second, two. I felt new impacts, but different. Muffled. Farther away, in another place. They weren't aimed at the door, but at the basement walls. I lowered my hands and heard concrete breaking, rebar snapping, whole chunks of the opposite wall falling. Then came a ringing silence. My heart pounded, my ears buzzed, my hands shook. I barely managed to get to my feet, took a few steps, and sat on the stairs. Thoughts raced in a torrent. My mind struggled to process them, to piece together a coherent picture. It took me time to realize what had just happened. And then I felt a cold, dead horror clench my insides with icy fingers, and a sharp, repulsive fear began to eat away at everything inside me like the most caustic acid. I understood the gravity of the situation, that something truly terrible had occurred. What had been behind that door all this time? What had been beating against it for 40 years? What had terrified the deputy foreman with just a glimpse, making him order that door welded shut? What was more terrible than the devil himself had gotten out. I can't vouch for the absolute truth of this story or the full sanity of the person telling it. My aunt is not crazy. On the contrary, she's a very sensible woman, but she has two things going on. She's deeply religious, and she went through a massive tragedy, the murder of her husband. Plus, the story I'm about to tell happened to her way back in childhood, and when I heard it, it gave me chills, so I decided to share it. Aunt Lena is from the post-war generation. Her parents went hungry, froze, and endured all kinds of hardships. As a result, she was born frail, and at age 5, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a pretty nasty diagnosis. In the 1950s, they treated it, sure, but the methods were long, painful, and let's be honest, sometimes downright brutal. Just picture it. A little kid shipped off to a sanatorium where she'd spend not a week or a month, but the next 2 to 3 years. With Soviet incomes and lifestyle, her parents from Moscow couldn't visit often. Upon arrival, they'd put her to bed and strictly forbid her from getting up so the infection wouldn't spread through her blood and body. That was one of the main treatments. And of course, a 5-year-old isn't going to listen, so they'd tie her to the bed. That's what happened to Aunt Lena. Luckily, she got a decent doctor. He was young, talented, and most importantly, genuinely compassionate. For the first 3 days, little Lenochka cried almost nonstop. The doctor came to her with flowers and candy, like a gallant suitor. Eventually, she calmed down, but nights were brutal, and not just because she missed her parents. When lights out was announced and they killed the lamps, kids would start running through the hallways playing tag. Lenochka couldn't join in because she was tied down, but she called them to her room. At first, the kids either didn't hear her or pretended not to. Then they started teasing her. They'd stand in the doorway, beckon her to come out, but never step inside. Lena got offended and stopped calling. Several times during the night, the kids would suddenly go quiet and scatter. Lenochka saw a tall shadow pass through the corridor, probably an orderly, but until then, she hadn't ratted on the troublemakers. Eventually, her patience ran out. One night, when the shadow passed again, Lena called out to it and complained about the kids running around. The figure stopped dead. In the dark, the girl could only make out a vague silhouette, but she knew it was staring at her. Without a word, the orderly stepped into the room. It was pitch black in there, only a dim glow from the window, and Lenochka immediately understood this was no orderly. First, he wasn't dressed like medical staff. Second, he moved weirdly, kind of shuffling his feet. Third, his arms were bent, and he kept wiggling his fingers in front of his face, like he was fiddling with something invisible. And he breathed with a hoarse wheeze. The strange man shuffled quickly toward her bed. Lenochka was terrified. The closer he got, the less human he seemed. Aunt Lena still can't clearly explain what or who that was. She squeezed her eyes shut because she couldn't run. She was tied down. When she felt the figure was right next to her, a child's voice came from the hallway. Some boy was yelling silly taunts like, "Can't catch me, can't get me." When Lenochka dared to peek, the shadow was already back in the corridor, apparently chasing the boy. After that, the nighttime running continued, but Lena never again called out to that tall shadow, not even glancing at the doorway. Later, she saw the children from the sanatorium in broad daylight for the first time, and was shocked to learn she'd been the only child patient in that building. There had been a group of kids before her, but some had been transferred to a ward with a milder regime before she arrived. And a few, sadly, had died. The disease was too advanced. Thank God, Aunt Lena recovered and was also moved to a ward where she could walk and play. There were scary stories there too, like the half-ruined building nearby that German POWs had started but never finished. Someone supposedly died during construction, and people said their souls still lived in there. Aunt Lena earned a reputation as the bravest girl in the ward because she ran through those ruins without fear. She knew where the real terror in that sanatorium was.